Not only are American corporations pulling in higher profits than ever, they're currently receiving more federal tax subsidies and tax breaks than any other time in history. On top of that, they're getting billions every year in new tax breaks. So now many corporations are paying their CEO more than they pay Uncle Sam. Joining me now to talk about that is Howard Nations. Howard, it just seems like Congress just can't give enough away. They can't give enough welfare away to multinational corporations and at the same time deprive the average worker of every damn thing they can. It is so upside down for this not to be talked about every night on the news is just beyond me. Talk about what the Institute for Policy Studies had to say about this. It's a startling report.
Well, it points out some very big lies that have been repeated so often that they've now been believed by the American public. Let's begin with the fact that of 7 of the 30 largest American corporations who were highly profitable in 2013 earned $74 billion in profits.
$74 billion, correct.
They paid no taxes, but it gets worse than that. They actually received $1.9 billion in refunds. Now get that straight. They paid no taxes. They made $74 billion in profits. They paid no taxes, but they received $1.9 billion in refunds. So their net effective tax rate was a negative 2.5%. How do you receive $1.9 billion in refunds if you pay no taxes? Government
Howard,
subsidies.
To me, even more incredible, look at what they paid their CEOs. I mean, the same corporations. Tell the viewers how that works. Okay, they make billions. They pay no taxes. When the average American is barely trying to get by and pays every cent of his taxes. Talk about what they do for their CEOs.
Well, they're distributing funds to their CEOs instead of paying taxes. They distribute funds to the CEOs and the shareholders as dividends. The CEOs pay, of those 7, average $17.5 million a year on that $74 billion in profits. But if you look at the 100 highest paid CEOs in America in 2013, 29 of those received more money than the corporation paid in taxes to the government. In other words, they paid their CEO more than they paid the government in taxes. 29 of those received an average of $32 million last year in salary. In corporations that reported $24 billion in profits, they paid no corporate taxes. They also received $238 million in subsidies after paying no taxes, so their net effective tax rate was 1%. 12 CEOs of the companies that reported U.S. losses, their CEOs averaged $36.6 million in income.
Oh, well, okay, let's back up and tell it really how. I mean, this is such an ugly story. Will you tell me how many times you've heard this on mainstream media? How about zero? How about zero? Because some of those big bonuses are paid to people running corporate media. Okay, here's what is really bothersome, I think, when most people understand this. Let's take Citigroup. That's the company that received the largest tax refund in America. Now, this is a company that taxpayers had to bail them out to billions of dollars they were so damn corrupt, so criminal, so incompetent that taxpayers had to bail them out. Okay, after we bail them out in 2013, they pay their CEO $18 million and they get a refund for $260 million. Now, is that typical of what we're seeing? What other companies should we be looking at here that are doing the same kind of ridiculous scam to the taxpayers?
Well, across the board, in your top 500, you can look at the S&P 500. You can look at the top 100. It's the major corporations, and what they're doing. What you're hearing is the theory that they have to give these big refunds to the corporations because if they don't, they leave America and they go overseas. They argue that the corporate tax rate is the highest in the world, when in fact they claim it's 35%, when in fact the actual average payment is 19.4%, which is less than what most small businesses pay. And the fact is, right now, taxes as a share of gross domestic product are near an all-time low, and corporate profits are at an all-time high. And you hear this big lie about how corporations are the job creators. The fact is, there are 9 million unemployed and 3 million been unemployed for more than 6 months. At the same time, corporations are not putting money back into the business and creating profits. What they're doing, they're not hiring workers. They are repurchasing their own stock. They took the money from the bailout that they were supposed to put into hiring new workers and creating new business. What they did was they're not hiring workers, they're repurchasing their stock, they're buying out their competitors, they're merging, all of which reduces unemployment.
Well, let me stop you right there. Okay, let's talk about the merger, the acquisitions. That is something the CEO does because most of the time it's going to raise stock value. Right. And if you raise stock value, the CEO gets to say, well, you need to pay me more. So it's driven by these damn insider Wall Street MBAs. There's a small group of them. I mean, they move from company to company, about 100 of them that move from company to company, pulling off these scams. And one is hell with the workers. Thank you, taxpayers, for bailing us out to the tune of trillions of dollars. We'll take the money. We won't put it back into the working world. We won't hire people. Trickle-down is complete, utter nonsense. Instead, we're going to engage in acquisitions, and we're going to raise our value. Therefore, they're going to pay us more. Howard, here's the number I saw. Right now, 80% of all the tax breaks that Congress is talking about, they're talking about going to the largest corporations in America. Did I get that right?
You have that right. And what you see now is a redistribution of wealth. They're talking about redistribution of wealth and criticizing Obama's redistribution. There is a redistribution of wealth because there are two theories, and you really need to understand this so you know the lies when you hear them. The theories are retain and reinvest. Corporations followed the theories of retaining and reinvesting from World War II through the 1970s.
And what does that mean? Explain
that.
Well,
it means that they retain, when they get their earnings, they take their earnings, they retain their earnings, and they reinvest their earnings back into their business, which allows them to create more products, hire more workers, so the money flows right back into the economy. That's the retain and reinvest. That's what you hear. This is the argument that's still used, especially by Republicans. We have to give this money back to the corporations. They're the job creators. That's the theory of job creation. But the fact of the matter is, since Reagan, they shifted to downsize and distribute, which the Congress still argues that retain and reinvest is what's going on. That's been a lie for 40 years. It's a big lie to justify their pandering to corporations. The fact is, from 2003 to 2012, the S&P 500 used 54% of their earnings to buy back their own stock. When you buy back your own stock, they also paid 37% of their earnings to pay dividends. When you repurchase your own stock, you boost your earnings per share, which in turn boosts your stock prices. And your stock prices and your earnings is what determines the CEO.
Yeah, and
income.
So in the end, I mean, the shorthand is in the end, you have Congress giving out subsidies, permanent subsidies to people who own NASCAR track, NASCAR car
yeah.
racing tracks, they get a subsidy. The people who own Puerto Rican rum producing, they get a subsidy from the U.S. government. Permanent tax breaks. And the average person out there sometimes is trying to figure out how in the hell they even pay their mortgage. How do they feed their family? And we're worried about what these CEOs of the world's largest corporations are making, because we're telling everybody, listen, give these guys more money and they're going to share it with you. And we know, don't we, that is an absolute total lie. Howard Nations, as usual, thank you for bringing the story. I defy anybody to find this being reported anywhere else in corporate media. You will not find it. Try to go online and try to find another media reporting this story. Thank you for joining me, Howard.